It was supposed to be a simple day of cleaning and organizing, a mundane chore to help my parents downsize before their big move. Their attic hadn't been touched in years. The air was stale, heavy with the scent of mildew and dust, and the dim overhead bulb struggled to pierce the shadows. Boxes stacked unevenly and marked with faded labels leaned precariously in every corner. I sighed, rolling up my sleeves, and got to work. Most of the boxes were predictable. Faded holiday decorations, yellowed photo albums, my dad's old tools. But then I found one that drew my attention. A small, unassuming box tucked behind an old trunk, labeled in my mom's neat handwriting, Ethan's Things. Seeing my name gave me pause. I didn't think my childhood warranted its own box. I wasn't sentimental, and neither were my parents. Yet here it was. Curiosity pulled me closer. I knelt, brushing off the thick layer of dust, and opened it. At first, nothing stood out. A mix of forgotten toys and school projects. A one-eyed teddy bear. A set of plastic dinosaurs, their paint chipped from years of play. A crayon drawing of a figure with an oversized head and an uneven smile. But at the very bottom of the box, buried beneath scraps of paper, was something unexpected, a VHS tape. Its label was handwritten, the ink smudged but still legible. Mr. Smiles' Playhouse. The name stirred something in me. Memories surfaced, hazy and incomplete, like trying to recall a dream after waking. I vaguely remembered watching the show as a kid. Bright colors, puppets. A melody that felt half-remembered, its notes faintly sour. And Mr. Smiles. His painted smile stretched unnaturally across my thoughts. Instead of nostalgia, I felt a creeping discomfort. There was something wrong about the memory, I just couldn't pinpoint what. I carried the tape downstairs. My parents were in the kitchen, wrapping plates in newspaper and chatting about the move. "Hey," I said, holding it up. "Do you guys remember this?" My mom turned, and her face stiffened the moment her eyes landed on the tape. Her fingers tensed around the dish she was holding. "Where did you find that?" she asked sharply, her voice taut. "In the attic," I replied, frowning. "It was in a box with my name on it. Wasn't this a show I used to watch?" Her reaction caught me off guard. She set the plate down carefully, as though it might shatter, and shook her head. "You shouldn't have found that," she said quietly. "I thought I got rid of it." "What are you talking about?" I asked, my curiosity growing. "It's just an old kid's show, isn't it?" She turned away, busying herself with the dishes, but her movements were rigid. "You don't remember it," she said flatly. "Kind of. I remember watching it, but it's blurry. What's the big deal?" "You shouldn't watch it," she said quickly, her voice unsteady. "Just throw it away, Ethan. Don't ask why. Just get rid of it." Her words hung in the air, heavy and strange. My mom wasn't usually like this, direct, yes, but not visibly rattled. I glanced at my dad, but he just shrugged and avoided my eyes. I didn't press further. I left the tape on the counter and walked out, but the unease stayed with me. The rest of the day passed uneventfully, yet I couldn't shake the lingering sense of dread. What could possibly be wrong with an old kids' show? That night, long after my parents had gone to bed, I decided to find out. I dug our VHS player out of the basement and set it up with the guest room TV. It took some fiddling, but I eventually got it working. The tape slid in with a soft click, and the screen flared with shifting static. For a moment, I thought the tape was broken. The screen flickered, the audio humming faintly. Then the static cleared, revealing a colorful, hand-painted set. Cartoonish flowers and grinning suns decorated the walls. A whimsical tune played in the background, its notes slightly off-key and unsettling. "Welcome to Mr. Smiles' Playhouse," a voice sang brightly. The camera panned, and there he was, Mr. Smiles. A puppet with an oversized head painted with freckles and a smile that stretched unnaturally. He wore a bright yellow bow tie and white gloves that waved eagerly at the screen. "Hello, children," he chirped, his voice high-pitched and oddly captivating. "I've missed you so much." The words struck me as unnervingly intimate, as though he weren't addressing an audience, but speaking directly to me. The show continued, the melody still playing as the camera revealed the set. It was crude but colorful, a playhouse cobbled together from painted cardboard and props. Cheap and cheerful, yet somehow deeply unsettling. Mr. Smiles stood front and center, his gloved hands clasped as he swayed to the music. "Welcome, friends, to the happiest place in the world," he said, his high-pitched voice almost unnaturally cheerful. "Here at the Playhouse, we always have so much fun." I shifted uncomfortably on the bed. The show was vaguely familiar, but there was something about it that didn't sit right with me. It wasn't just the grainy quality or the garish set design. It was the atmosphere. The way the camera lingered on Mr. Smiles a second too long, the laugh track bursting in at strange intervals, misplaced and overly loud. It felt wrong. "Let's say hello to my friends," Mr. Smiles exclaimed, clapping his hands together. The camera panned to introduce his co-stars. Wobbles the Clown, a puppet with floppy limbs and painted-on tears, and Sniffy the dog, a patchwork hound with mismatched button eyes. Finally, there was Miss Poppy, a porcelain doll with a fixed, unsettling smile and glassy, unblinking eyes. Each of them greeted the audience in turn, their voices subtly warped in a way that made my skin crawl. "Hi there, boys and girls," Wobbles said, his voice a shrill falsetto that grated against my ears. "We're going to have the best day ever. Remember to always be happy." Miss Poppy chimed in, her voice flat and monotone, as if she were reciting lines without meaning. The show continued, but the content felt disjointed, almost nonsensical. Mr. Smiles and his friends played a game of hide-and-seek, but the camera cuts were abrupt and disorienting. One moment they were laughing and running through the playhouse. The next, the screen hissed with interference before resuming in a completely different scene. In one of these cuts, the set had changed. The colors were muted, the props scuffed and worn. Mr. Smiles stood motionless in the center of the screen, staring into the camera. His grin appeared even wider now, and his painted freckles more pronounced. The laugh track faltered awkwardly, replaced by a low hum of white noise. "Do you want to play with us?" Mr. Smiles asked, his voice softer but sharper somehow. He leaned toward the camera, his oversized head dominating the frame. "We've been waiting for you, Ethan." I sat upright, my heart pounding. I couldn't be right. Rewinding the tape was clumsy and slow, but I had to be sure. When I replayed the moment, the name was gone. This time, Mr. Smiles simply said, "We've been waiting for you, friend." The interference grew louder, nearly drowning out his words. An icy unease settled over me. I paused the tape, staring at the frozen image of Mr. Smiles on the screen. His painted eyes seemed locked onto mine, unmoving. The air in the room felt heavier, as though every sound was muffled. My hands tensed as I pressed play again. The next segment was a sing-along. Mr. Smiles and his friends crowded around a piano, their voices warbling through an off-key rendition of a children's song I didn't recognize. The lyrics were strange, eerily simple, yet vaguely threatening. "We're all so happy, don't you see? Come and play, come and be free. Smile, smile, smile all day, or the bad things come to stay." The camera panned to each puppet in turn. Wobble's painted tears glistened, as if freshly applied. Miss Poppy's unblinking stare felt more accusatory than welcoming. Then the screen hissed again, and the tape jumped to another scene. This time, The playhouse looked darker, the lighting dim and uneven. Mr. Smiles stood holding hands with a group of children, their faces distorted, as though smeared on the tape. They were sitting in a circle, rocking slowly to a soft lullaby playing in the background. "Let's all smile together," Mr. Smiles said, his tone eerily calm. "Let's make it last forever." The screen flickered, and for an instant, the children's faces came into focus. They weren't smiling. They were crying. Silent tears ran down their cheeks as they stared directly into the camera, their wide eyes brimming with terror. I hit pause, my chest tightening. What the hell was this? This wasn't the kids' show I remembered. This wasn't anything meant for children. The tape clicked loudly in the player, the machine groaning as if it were struggling to keep up. The screen filled with static again, but this time it didn't fade. I ejected the tape and dropped it onto the table, my hands shaking. I told myself it was just an old, poorly made show. Maybe it was some bizarre art project or a forgotten public access program that my parents had accidentally recorded. But as I sat there in the flickering glow of the TV, I couldn't rid myself of the sense that Mr. Smiles' painted expression was still watching me. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I lay in the guest bed staring at the ceiling as fragments of the tape replayed in my mind. The distorted laughter, the blurred faces of the children, and, most vividly, Mr. Smiles' unnerving smile. Every creak of the old house set my nerves on edge, and the faint hum of the attic fan reminded me of the hiss of interference from the tape. When I finally drifted off, my dreams were restless and fractured. I dreamt of the playhouse. I was standing in the middle of the set, surrounded by its garish cardboard walls and oversized props. The colors seemed drained, the edges torn and sagging. Mr. Smiles was there too, towering over me, his grin stretched unnervingly wide. He didn't move, didn't speak, but his presence bore down on me like an invisible weight. The puppets were there as well, their blank eyes unflinching and fixed on me. The stillness was oppressive. Then all at once they began singing that same eerie song. Smile, smile, smile all day, or the bad things come to stay. I jolted awake, my breath shallow and uneven. My body was soaked with sweat, my pulse erratic. The room was silent, with pale light filtering through the curtains. I tried to shake off the dream, but its weight clung to me, lingering in every corner of my mind. Staying in bed wasn't an option. I needed answers. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the VHS tape. It was just an old show, I tried to convince myself. It couldn't hurt me. But if that were true, why had my mom reacted so strangely? Why couldn't I remember more about watching it as a kid? I picked up the phone and called her. She answered after a few rings, her voice groggy. "Ethan, it's early. What's wrong?" "Mom, I need to know about the tape," I said, skipping any small talk. There was a long pause on the other end. "I told you not to watch it," she said softly. "But why? What's the big deal? It's just a kid's show." "No, it's not," she said, her voice trembling slightly. I don't know what it is, Ethan. We didn't mean for you to see it. We thought it was gone." "What do you mean, gone?" I asked, gripping the phone tightly. "When you were little, we had a birthday party for you," she began reluctantly. "We hired a performer to entertain the kids. He called himself Mr. Smiles. He brought puppets, sang songs. It seemed fine at first, but then something happened. A weight settled in my chest, cold and unrelenting. What happened?" She hesitated. "The kids came running out of the playroom crying. You wouldn't talk to us for days after. You just sat in your room drawing those pictures. "What pictures?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "You don't remember, do you?" she said. "You drew him over and over again, Mr. Smiles. We thought it was just a phase, but then the tape showed up." I swallowed hard. "What do you mean it's hoed up?" "It wasn't ours, Ethan. We didn't buy it. We didn't record it. One day it was just there, sitting on the shelf with your other tapes. You begged us to let you watch it, so we did. But it wasn't right. It wasn't a normal show. Your dad said it felt like it was watching us." Her voice faltered. "We tried to throw it away, more than once. But every time we did, it came back. We burned it, Ethan. We burned it, and it still came back." My mouth was dry, my mind racing. "Why didn't you tell me this?" "You were too young," she said. "We thought it was over when we moved. We never saw the tape again, until now." I glanced at the tape on the table, my stomach twisting. "What do I do?" "I don't know," she said, her voice breaking. "Just don't watch it again, please." I hung up, my hands trembling. Her story sounded absurd, like something out of a campfire horror tale. And yet the fear in her voice felt unmistakably real. Too real. I wanted to believe it was just an elaborate trick of my mind, but deep down I knew better. I wasn't done with the tape. Not yet. I needed to know the truth. I couldn't explain the pull it had over me. My mother's warnings echoed in my mind like a siren, but the tape gnawed at my thoughts, a question I couldn't leave unanswered. It felt personal now. "It was watching us," she'd said. What the hell did that mean? How could a children's show feel alive? The house was silent except for the faint groan of wood settling. I poured another cup of coffee and returned to the guest room, where the VHS player sat. The tape still perched on the table. For a long time I just stared at it, debating whether to press play. And then I did. The tape slid into the player with a dull clunk. The screen hissed with interference, longer than before. Just as I was about to eject it, the hum of the familiar jingle began. "Welcome to Mr. Smiles' Playhouse." The set reappeared, bright, garish colors, but this time the surface looked cracked and worn. Mr. Smiles stood in the center of the playhouse, but something was off. His bow tie was askew, and the painted grin on his face looked smeared, as if the paint had run into the cracks of his puppet head. "Hello again, Ethan," he said. I sat motionless, unable to process what I'd heard. His voice, high-pitched and saccharine, was unmistakable. But this time, there was no mistaking what he'd said. He'd spoken my name. The interference hummed louder, like a low, guttural growl just beneath his words. My hand shot to the remote, pausing the tape. I stared at the screen, the image frozen. The stillness of Mr. Smiles felt palpable, as though he were about to move. "This isn't real," I muttered to myself. I hit play again. The screen jolted. Mr. Smiles was gone. The camera had shifted to another part of the set, a darkened corner I didn't recall seeing before. Shadows pooled on the cardboard floor, broken only by the pale, flickering light of a single bulb dangling from a frayed string. The puppets were there. Wobbles, Sniffy, and Miss Poppy. But they stood frozen, their lifeless faces turned toward the camera as if waiting. A faint whisper crackled through the audio, so soft it was almost imperceptible. "Come play with us, Ethan." My hands gripped the edge of the bed, knuckles white. "No, no, no, no," I whispered aloud, rewinding and replaying the scene. Every time it happened the same way, those words, faint but unmistakable. I wanted to stop. I wanted to tear the tape from the player and destroy it, but I didn't. I let it play. The next scene was worse. The camera cut to a group of children sitting in a circle on the floor. Their faces were distorted, smeared like oil paintings, ruined by careless hands. They rocked back and forth, humming the same unsettling tune from before. Smile, smile, smile all day, or the bad things come to stay. At the center of the circle stood Mr. Smiles. His movements were erratic, jerking violently as though he were a puppet himself controlled by unseen strings. His head twitched to one side as he turned toward the camera. His grin warped, spreading unnervingly across his face, the painted edges smearing into his cheeks. "You're almost ready," he whispered. The screen snapped to black. I exhaled sharply, realizing I hadn't breathed. The VHS player clicked loudly as the tape finished rewinding itself. I stared at the blank screen, the pulse in my ears thudding like a drumbeat. "Almost ready?" I murmured. "What does that mean?" And then, without warning, the TV flickered back to life. The screen was still dark, but something faint moved within it, a shifting outline. I leaned forward, squinting. It was my reflection. But it wasn't right. The room behind me looked dimmer, the shadows darker, deeper. And then I saw him. Mr. Smiles. He stood in the doorway behind me, his figure looming at the edge of the light. His head tilted slowly, the warped grin stretching impossibly wide as he stepped forward. I spun around, my breath catching, but the doorway was empty. There was no one there. When I turned back to the TV, my reflection stared at me. Alone now. But something had changed. My mouth. It was smiling. I stumbled back from the TV, my legs striking the bed frame. The smile on my reflection stayed frozen on the screen, inhumanly wide, stretching far beyond the limits of my face. My own image stared back at me, but it wasn't me. I yanked the tape from the player, the TV hissing with interference as I did. The sound drilled into my ears, warping into faint whispers that threaded through the noise. "Ethan, come back, play with us." I slammed the tape onto the ground and stomped on it, the brittle plastic shattering under my heel. Piece after piece broke apart until it was nothing but shards scattered on the floor. I pulled the power cord from the wall and ripped it free. The screen flickered once and then went dark. The room fell silent. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, my body tense, staring at the lifeless screen. My mind raced, trying to convince myself it wasn't real. Just a broken tape, a malfunctioning TV, my mind playing tricks on me. But no matter how many times I told myself that, I couldn't make myself believe it. When I finally left the guest room, I carried the shattered remains of the tape with me. Outside in the yard, I grabbed the old metal trash can by the garage, dumping the fragments inside. I doused them in lighter fluid and struck a match, watching as the flames consumed them. The plastic melted, releasing thick, noxious smoke that curled into the air. The fire hissed and spat, as though the tape itself was resisting. "It's done," I whispered, watching the last pieces curl into ash. But it wasn't done. That night I dreamt of Mr. Smiles again. The dream was sharper this time, more vivid. I was back in the playhouse, standing in the center of the cardboard set. The colors were muted, the paint peeling from the walls. The puppets surrounded me, their glassy eyes locked on mine. Mr. Smiles stood in the corner, his grin splitting the dim light like a crack in the shadows. "You can't leave," he said softly, his voice echoing in unnatural, overlapping tones. I turned to run, but the set twisted around me, the walls shifting and stretching like a mirage. The exit was always out of reach. Behind me, his laughter grew louder, low and guttural, scraping against my ears like metal on bone. Each time I looked back, he was closer. I woke up gasping, the sheets clinging to me, damp and cold. My body ached with exhaustion. I sat there in the dark, clutching the blanket as I tried to calm the chaotic rhythm of my thoughts. And then I noticed it. A smell. It was faint, but unmistakable. The sharp chemical tang of burnt plastic. I turned on the bedside lamp, my hand trembling. And there, sitting on the nightstand, was the VHS tape. Intact. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook as I lifted it, turning it over to see the label. Mr. Smiles' Playhouse. The ink was fresh, the handwriting precise, as though it had just been written. A wave of panic surged through me. I wanted to scream, to hurl it out the window and run as far as I could, but I knew it wouldn't matter. I had burned it. I had destroyed it. And yet, here it was. The truth settled over me like a shroud. The tape wasn't the problem. He was. I didn't sleep again that night. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the tape like it might spring to life at any moment. My thoughts raced, a tangled mess of fear and disbelief. I had burned it. I could still taste the faint, acrid smoke lingering in the back of my throat. But now it sat here, whole and untouched, as if nothing had ever happened. It felt heavier than it should, unnaturally so, like it was filled with something far more sinister than magnetic tape and plastic. Every instinct screamed at me to get rid of it again, bury it, crush it, throw it into the ocean. But deep down, I knew there was no escaping it. The house groaned around me, old wood shifting in the silence, but every sound sent a jolt through my body. Somewhere in the distance, I heard something faint, a melody, a sickening jingle. Welcome to Mr. Smiles' Playhouse. I shot up from the bed, my chest tightening. The sound wasn't coming from the guest room. It was coming from upstairs. The attic. I didn't want to go up there, but the jingle grew louder, sharper. My body moved before my mind could stop it, my bare feet padding down the hall. The attic stairs were already pulled down, a faint yellow glow spilling into the darkness. I hadn't touched them since earlier. Each step creaked under my weight as I climbed, the sound echoing like a warning. The air thickened, stale and sour, tinged with the sharp scent of something foul, rotting wood or stagnant water. The off-key notes of the xylophone scraped against my ears, each one sharper than the last. At the top, I stopped. The attic had changed. The bulb that had once hung from the ceiling was gone, replaced by a flickering light that cast shifting shadows. The space itself felt wrong, larger, the walls receding into dark corners that stretched endlessly into nothingness. And in the center of it all was a TV. The same TV I had used in the guest room. Its screen glowed faintly, casting distorted, shifting shadows. The tape was already playing. I couldn't see the image clearly from where I stood, but I knew who was on it. I didn't need to look. Mr. Smiles. I wanted to run, but my body felt locked in place. My breath caught in my throat as shadows near the TV began to writhe, pulling themselves into a shape, towering, jerking, and twitching unnaturally. The light flickered, and for a moment, I saw him. Mr. Smiles wasn't a puppet anymore. His oversized head was still there, painted and cracked, his grin twisted beyond recognition. But his body was something else, tall, impossibly tall, with unnaturally long limbs that moved like tangled marionette strings. His yellow bow tie was filthy, drenched in something dark and wet, and his gloved hands twitched as though straining to grab me. "Hello again, Ethan," he said. His voice was no longer cheerful. It crawled with static, layered with faint, sorrowful whispers that sounded like children crying. "You came back to play." I stumbled backward, my hands trembling as I grabbed the edge of the attic floor. "You're not real," I whispered. "You're not real." His head snapped violently to one side, the motion sharp and mechanical. "I've always been real. You brought me here." The TV crackled, the screen shifting. It showed a group of children huddled in a corner, their faces hidden in shadow. Their soft, desperate sobs filled the air. The camera zoomed in on one of them, a boy curled up with his knees to his chest. My stomach dropped. It was me. The boy on the screen had my face, my real face, pale, terrified. Mr. Smiles stepped into the frame, looming over the boy, his grin warping further, stretching until it consumed his entire face. His shadow engulfed the child completely. "Don't be scared," Mr. Smiles whispered, his voice reverberating through the attic. "We just want to smile with you. Forever." The TV erupted into static, the noise deafening. I pressed my hands to my ears, desperate to block it out, but the sound seemed to pierce straight through me. I dropped to my knees, the light flickering wildly around me. In every burst of darkness, I saw him, closer each time. When the static finally stopped, the attic fell silent. I opened my eyes, shaking. The TV was off, the attic was still. But Mr. Smiles was gone. Or so I thought. A faint whisper brushed against my ear, sending ice through my veins. "Let's smile together, Ethan." I don't remember how I got out of the attic. The next thing I knew, I was standing in the middle of the kitchen, the faint glow of dawn filtering through the curtains. My hands trembled, my clothes damp and clinging to my skin. I felt hollow, like something inside me had cracked open and spilled out. The silence pressed in, heavy and unnatural, as if the house itself were holding its breath, waiting. My mind kept replaying what I'd seen, the VHS, the children, him, my younger self staring back at me from the screen with hollow, terrified eyes. I couldn't make sense of it anymore. Mr. Smiles wasn't just a puppet or a forgotten TV character. He was something else, something alive. I staggered into the living room and collapsed onto the couch, burying my face in my hands. I needed to think. I needed to figure out what was happening to me. The phone's sharp ring shattered the stillness, making me jump. My fingers fumbled against the plastic as I grabbed the receiver. "Hello?" I croaked. For a moment, all I heard was static. Then a voice, faint and distorted, like it was speaking from far away. "Ethan." The phone slipped from my hands. It was him, Mr. Smiles. I stared at the receiver, the beat of my pulse thudding in my head like a warning. His voice seeped through the line, soft and distant. "Come back and play, Ethan. We're waiting for you." I slammed the phone down and stumbled away, every instinct screaming at me to leave. I grabbed my keys and bolted for the door, my mind a fog of panic. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay. The streets were deserted as I sped through the empty town, my thoughts spiraling. My mom had told me the truth, or at least as much of it as she understood. Mr. Smiles had been at my birthday party, and something had happened. Something I'd forgotten, or something I'd been made to forget. But the tape had dragged it back into the light, pulling it from the dark corners of my mind where it had been buried. The memory was still fragmented, but pieces were beginning to surface. The man in the costume, the puppets, the other kids. I remembered running, hiding in a closet, as the sounds of crying echoed through the house. And I remembered him. A voice, soft and coaxing but cold. "Don't cry. Smiling is so much better." I pressed the brakes hard, the car lurching to a stop in the middle of an empty road. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I sat there, breathing heavily. I couldn't run from this. The tape, the show, Mr. Smiles. It wouldn't stop until I faced it. The sky was streaked with the first light of dawn when I returned to the house. The place was silent when I stepped inside, but the air felt heavy again, oppressive. It was waiting for me. The attic stairs hung open, waiting. I climbed them slowly, each creak of the steps setting my nerves on edge. The TV was still there, sitting in the middle of the attic, but the screen was dark now. The tape lay on the floor in front of it, whole and undamaged, just as before. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. My name was scrawled on the label now, Ethan's Playhouse. A heavy pressure settled in my chest. I knew what I had to do. I had to watch it, all of it. Whatever was on this tape, whatever he wanted me to see, I had to face it. I slid the tape into the player and sat down in front of the TV. The static buzzed for a moment, but when the screen flickered to life, it wasn't the playhouse. It wasn't the puppets. It was me. A home video, shaky and grainy, filled the screen. I was a kid, 6 or 7 years old, sitting on the floor of my childhood living room, surrounded by brightly wrapped presents. I recognized it instantly. My birthday party. The camera panned to the doorway where a man in a costume stood. It was crude and homemade, an oversized puppet head with painted-on freckles and a wide, grinning mouth. His yellow bow tie was crooked, his gloves stained. "Here comes Mr. Smiles," my father's voice said from behind the camera, laughing. The kids cheered, but I didn't. I was staring at him, frozen, my smile faltering. Even then, I knew something was wrong. The tape jumped. Static hissed for a moment before the video resumed. The living room was empty now. The presents were scattered, torn apart. The camera was on the floor, tilted at an odd angle. And in the center of the room, Mr. Smiles sat cross-legged, surrounded by children. Their backs were to the camera, their heads tilted at unnatural angles as they swayed back and forth. He turned slowly, his painted face staring directly into the lens. "Smile, Ethan," he whispered. I felt it before I saw it. A presence behind me, cold and heavy, like the air itself had thickened. I turned around, and there he was. Mr. Smiles stood in the corner of the attic, half shrouded in shadow, his head tilted unnaturally to the side, the painted grin twisting across his face. "You've been such a good boy," he whispered, his voice layered with static. "It's time to come back home." I stood still, unable to move or scream. I couldn't do a damn thing. The TV flickered, and the children's voices returned, soft and hollow like a lullaby. "Smile, smile, smile all day, or the bad things come to stay." The shadows in the attic seemed to bleed toward him, pulling him forward as he stepped closer. A tremor ran through me, uncontrollable and cold. I shut my eyes tightly, every muscle in my body rigid. And then he spoke, his voice soft and cold, close to my ear. "Smile for me, Ethan." When I woke up, the attic was silent. I was lying on the cold wooden floor, the faint morning light leaking through cracks in the roof. For a moment, I thought, hoped, it had all been a nightmare. But then I saw it. The TV was gone. The tape was gone. But the attic wasn't the same. Faint outlines of cardboard flowers and crooked windows had been burned into the walls, ghostly echoes of Mr. Smiles' playhouse. In the far corner where he had stood, the floorboards were blackened, warped, as if something had clawed its way into or out of the wood. I scrambled to my feet, my limbs aching, a deep tightness in my chest. The shadows seemed to cling to the walls, dense and unmoving, as though they were still watching me, waiting. I needed to leave. I stumbled down the attic stairs, my breathing ragged and shallow, my thoughts looping on themselves. In the kitchen, I splashed icy water onto my face, the cold shocking me back to some semblance of reality. My reflection stared back at me from the window, disheveled, pale, hollow-eyed. But I wasn't smiling. Not anymore. It's over, I whispered, my voice hoarse. It's over. But as I turned away, something caught my eye. There, sitting in the center of the kitchen table, was the VHS tape. I froze, my legs giving way as I steadied myself against the counter. It was impossible. Couldn't be there. My hands trembled, fingers numb as I stepped toward it. The tape was intact, whole, like I'd never smashed it, never burned it. But the label was different now. It didn't say, Mr. Smiles' Playhouse. It said, Ethan's Playhouse. Smile forever. A surge of panic clawed through me. I grabbed the tape and hurled it against the wall. It hit with a dull thud and landed on the floor, unscathed. I screamed, raw and wordless, as terror clawed its way through me. I kicked it, stomped it, slammed it with my fists until my knuckles throbbed and bled. But the tape wouldn't break. It just sat there, solid and unyielding. The phone rang. The shrill sound shattered the heavy stillness. I froze, my stomach twisting, as I turned to look at the receiver. It rang again and again, sharp and insistent, until I picked it up with shaking hands. Hello? I whispered. Static? Then his voice, soft, sweet, layered with whispers and crackling distortion. Don't worry, Ethan. We'll smile together soon. The line clicked dead. I dropped the phone, bile rising in my throat. I had to get out of the house, out of the town, as far away as I could go. I grabbed my keys and stumbled through the front door, my legs unsteady as I ran toward the car. I didn't look back until I was behind the wheel. I drove for hours, the road blurring into a smear of gray, the empty horizon stretching forever in front of me. I didn't plan, didn't stop. I just drove. Eventually, I found myself at a run-down motel on the edge of nowhere. I locked the door, pulled the curtains shut, and sank onto the bed. My hands wouldn't stop trembling, no matter how hard I pressed them against my legs. The memories looped in my mind, each detail sharper, more relentless. The tape, the playhouse, the children. And him, Mr. Smiles. When I finally drifted into a restless sleep, I dreamed of him again. The same playhouse, the same song. But this time, I was in the center of the circle, surrounded by shadowy children. They swayed slowly, their wide, impossible smiles fixed on me. Together, they whispered in unison. Smile, smile, smile all day, or the bad things come to stay. Mr. Smiles loomed behind them, his figure towering, larger than before. The cracks in his face stretched, the painted grin twisting further, as though it could swallow me whole. You can't run forever, he whispered, his voice close, too close. I shot upright, my chest heaving as I gulped for air. The room was shrouded in darkness, but something felt off. A faint glow crept across the walls, pulsing softly. I turned toward the source. The motel TV was on, its screen alive with static, the hiss pressing into the silence like a presence. I hadn't turned it on. And sitting in front of it, waiting for me, was the tape. The label now read, Smile Forever. This time I didn't scream, I didn't fight it. I felt it, the grin spreading across my face, stretching wider, wider until it hurt. And in the dark, with the static hissing and his whispers crawling through my mind, I realized the truth. I wasn't smiling. He was.